Everyone, it's Alex, and it's that time of year again where we read about our dead lover's ghosts while we agonize remaining mortal with bitterness toward the next generation of our bloodline. And of course, I'm talking about Victober, or also known as Victorian October. Victober is probably the most rewarding experience I've had as a reader on BookTube and is really responsible for making me feel more approached to classics. And this is on part with the creative prompts every year we get from our hosts, who are Katie at Books and Things, Kate Howe, and Lucy the Reader. I will not be fully participating in these prompts for this year, but as always, I will be leaving the announcement videos by the three of them down below. The first read on my TBR is actually a part of the group read for this year, and that's Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. As always with books I haven't read yet, I like to remain pretty in the dark about them, which is pretty strange for making a TBR video, but I'm already familiar with Charlotte Bronte, having read Jane Eyre for my first year of Victober, and then reading Eliot last year, which I really loved. There's something so morally conscious to Charlotte Bronte's stories that are really endearing to me, using her stories as bait until slowly the plot unfolds to feeling like it opens up to these more thematic gestures. With Jane Eyre specifically, it was a certain plot twist in the book that made me really think about the woman at this time. And with Eliot, it was my consideration to learning more about the privacy of one's own story and how we equate one's life to one's story. I know none of that probably made sense, but I don't want to spoil anybody for not having read Jane Eyre or Eliot, but I feel like with reading Shirley, I can only imagine third time's the charm, and how I think Charlotte Bronte is a great introduction to Victorian literature, and I'm sure I'll think the same when I finish Shirley as well. Up next, I have a writer that I actually wasn't too impressed with whenever I read him before, and that is Anthony Trollope. I read The Warden by Trollope, which I know is only the first book in the Barsetshire series, and so I know that people say the second book is actually the best, if not the best work in Trollope's portfolio. But this year, I'm really gunning for making sure whether or not I can decide if I like Trollope, so I'm gonna read The Way We Live Now. Another Victorian writer, George Eliot, who I really love, cited Trollope, specifically The Way We Live Now, as being what inspired her, feeling like she could write something like Middlemarch. I do think that The Way We Live Now is Trollope's longest work, so again, I think this will pretty much do it for me deciding whether or not I like him. Another repeat author I have is actually one that I like a lot, and that is Thomas Hardy, and I'll be reading Far from the Madding Crowd. In previous years for Victober, I read The Mayor of Casterbridge and also Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and there's just something about how Thomas Hardy is able to deconstruct or make me feel like the moral dilemma of a character is actively decomposing. Hardy had some fleeting flirtations with me as a reader whenever I would become so bewildered by a character's strong sense of how they face adversity. And I found that my own questioning of my own morality being whenever I read Hardy's books is that I can't tell if he's either being like really clever and investigative or if he's just making fun of me. So hopefully 3 for 3 with Far from the Madding Crowd, that Hardy manages to make me feel both sickly repulsed and disgusted, but in the best way possible. And the last book on my TBR is actually one I've read before and was my favorite book of 2019, having read like 100 books, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This will be the third time that I will be reading Middlemarch, and I definitely don't think I'll finish it by October, but I plan to sort of spread it out and read it by the end of the year. If I could summarize Middlemarch, I just feel like it's so deceptively human. It doesn't even take place in the Victorian era, but it's just something about how we have this large roster of characters and their medley of interactions being tied or having such strong associations with life that really intrigues me, causing me to have kind of this lucid sympathy towards how each character characterized their own perception of failure and what that means. Failure particularly being strongly tied to a person's class or their occupation at the time, which is really common for Victorian novels. But there was something so spot on about the self-actualization of all of these characters in the best way that I thought eventually would make me feel long-winded or fatigued, but I was relentlessly interested in this large and long story. So there you have it. Those are my books that I plan to read for Victober 2020. And I feel like it's becoming this pattern where I like to read a lot of writers that I've read before already so I can just compare their work. So if you are participating in Victober, I would really love to know what you're reading, especially maybe more beyond of the writers I've already mentioned. Except Wuthering Heights, because for those of you that caught it, I was alluding to that book in the beginning of this video, which is a book I really love, and if you haven't read Wuthering Heights, I would just stop this video now and just go ahead and pick that for your Victober. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.